Alright, hello and welcome to this guide on buffs. This will be a max roll companion video so that we can just cover it in a way that you can listen to instead of reading if that's your thing. It should be a pretty short video because it's a pretty short guide. So first off, let's talk about what are buffs. What do we mean by buffs? Buffs are just something that enhances the power of your character that is not permanent, and usually it requires some sort of trigger event to do it. For example, you use a X skill and Y buff happens for 4 seconds. That would be an example of a buff. Argent Veil is a good example. When you drop below 70% health, you gain a stack of Silver Shroud, and Silver Shroud's a buff that gives you 100% chance to dodge the next hit. So that would be an example of there's a trigger event, you drop below 70% health, and then Silver Shroud lasts until the next hit. Once that happens, it dodges, and Silver Shroud goes away. Quicksilver Wind's another example. While spinning, you have increased movement speed. This is actually from Warpath, and so it only applies during the event that you are spinning, and when you stop spinning, you no longer gain the movement speed. So that's how buffs work. They're temporary, and they are triggered by some sort of event, usually by you doing something or something happening to you. All right, let's go ahead and get into some of the differences between buffs versus stats, and then buff types, and then we're done. Buffs are pretty simple, pretty easy to talk about. So the difference between buffs versus stats, again, is that kind of like exactly what I was saying before. One is permanent, stats are permanent, buffs are not permanent. So buffs are going to give you some benefit. By the way, the difference between buffs and ailments, if it wasn't clear, is ailments are a negative thing that happens to you, and buffs are a positive thing that happens to you. So you want a buff, you don't want an ailment, but you want to apply ailments to the enemy, but you don't want to buff them, which fortunately you can't really do that. So yeah, buffs, not permanent, need an event. Stats are a permanent addition to your character that increases their power. So if something is not permanent and requires an event, it will be considered a buff, at least for our purposes. What kind of buffs can you get? Let's look at a couple of examples of buffs. The amount of buffs in this game are insane. There's so many of them, so we're definitely not going to be able to cover all of them, but we can at least cover enough to give you an idea of what these are and where they come from. So there's 3 types of buffs. There's offensive, defensive, utility. Offense, clearly your damage increase. Defense, you take less damage or less likely to take damage, and utility is something like movement speed, for example, would be considered a utility. So let's talk about some offensive buffs. We're going to break all these up into something you get from a skill, something you get from a passive, and something you get from a piece of gear, as well as a shrine, because shrines can also offer you buffs for a limited period of time. So aspect of the crow is something. Aspect of the crow is something you get from summon storm crows, which is a primalist skill that gives you flat melee and spell lightning damage, or a chance to get that when crows hit enemies. This is a very powerful buff for you for when your minions or your companions, in this case your storm crows, actually are hitting enemies and they're giving you more power for it. It's a temporary buff, and the event is that the crows are attacking enemies. Arcane Momentum is found in the sorcerer tree. It's a buff that increases cast speed after casting a spell. This one's actually changed a bit recently. It's gotten more powerful with some other stuff, but yeah, you cast a spell, you gain cast speed to cast subsequent spells for it. It's only for a period of time. I believe it's only 2 seconds now. But it gives you the event being you cast the spell, and then the buff being the next spells, assuming you do it within the right period of time, will be cast more quickly. Undisputed is a unique that increases your melee damage when hitting bleeding enemies, and it stacks. It's actually a very powerful axe. It can go up to 255% increased physical damage for each recent melee hit against a bleeding enemy. A very cool axe that gives you that buff right from the axe itself. And then critical shrines are shrines that grant 100% critical strike chance for 60 seconds. The event is you click on the shrine, and of course the buff is you get crit strike chance for 60 seconds. All right, let's move on to defensive buffs. We'll start with Desperate Shroud, which is a Death Seal node. Death Seal is a skill in Acolyte that increases armor and stun avoidance as long as the skill is active. So you use Death Seal. While you're in Death Seal, you get increased armor and stun avoidance, and when you leave Death Seal, you lose the armor and stun avoidance. Infinite Bulwark is a Forge Guard passive that provides additional armor and chance to find potions whenever a potion is used. So it actually is a defense and utility in one. So you use a potion, that is your event. Your armor and chance to find potions is your buff. Ravenous Void is a famous pair of unique gloves. They're famous for a number of reasons, including being famously very difficult to find. But they have some very interesting buffs themselves, which is as long as you are above your endurance threshold, you gain a stack of Void Barrier, and Void Barrier, actually, there we go. Void Barrier causes you to take 5% less damage per stack. So this can be quite strong in reducing the damage that you take. It does have a cap, although I don't see it showing. There, it's up to 3 times. So you could take 15% less total damage if you're wearing Ravenous Void and are above your endurance threshold cap. Stunning Shrine is the shrine that will provide you with the ability to stun enemies more easily. There are no true defensive shrines right now, so this is about as close as we get. But being able to stun enemies more easily is a good defensive tactic, because they're not going to hit you because they can't. All right, last one, utility buffs. So there's a number of different types of things in here. Let's start with momentum, which is from Shift, the skill that is a rogue skill. This provides you a large burst, but short burst of movement speed. It gives you actually 50% movement speed, and when you invest 3 points into it, it lasts 1.5 seconds. This is actually one of my favorite buff nodes in the entire game, because I really like to go fast. Silent Protector is a buff that provides defense and utility. This node is in the Shaman tree, so that is Primalist, and it provides both mana regen and armor when a player has an active totem. So the event being, you have a totem out, and the benefit being the armor and the mana regen for having it. As soon as the totem is gone, if you haven't cast another totem, you will lose the buff. Quicksilver Coil is a great leveling unique that can be used in the endgame that has a chance to provide haste for 1 second on hit. Haste is a buff that provides 30% movement speed, and with high attacking builds, this can be kept up most of the time, providing a significant amount of move speed and making clear much faster. And finally, we have Water Shrine. This shrine provides increased mana regen and cooldown recovery for 60 seconds. All right, that's all I have for buffs. I hope that helps to explain what they are, how they work, and where you can get them from. Enjoy your time in Last Epoch, and I will see you all again real soon.